All right, I've got something very special today. We're going to talk about Dell APEX. You've probably seen it in some ads, you've probably seen new stuff on the internet, but what is Dell APEX? And I know it's got something to do with the cloud, and well, I just thought it would be better to just go to the source. Joining us is Caitlin Gordon. She's the VP of Product Management for Dell, and she's going to tell us all about APEX. But I think you're going to want to learn some stuff here because APEX is going to do some interesting things at the edge and with the cloud, and even possibly with your on-premise infrastructure, or sort of tying all those things together. So, welcome, and can you give us a rundown? Like, what's the elevator pitch for APEX?
Yeah, and especially what we announced last week, it's all about multi-cloud, and what we really find in reality, multi-cloud is multi-contract, and all it actually means is I picked these hyperscalers and these SaaS providers, and I signed up a whole bunch of contracts with them, and now I got to figure out how to make it work together. And that's it's a tough scenario. And honestly, a lot of times it's pre-committed spend, so it's even worse, right? I signed up that I'm going to consume this. Now I got to figure out how to consume it and how to make it all make sense and make sure it's secure. So
I know that I need the cloud, and I know that I need to give cloud providers money. Where do I go?
Yeah, I already gave them the money. How do we make sense of all this? And we're in a unique position, and that's really what APEX is all about: is how do we simplify that experience? How do we provide that cloud experience where you need the data? How do you really kind of neutralize and give some commonalities and simplicity to this world that, I mean, studies show 80+% of customers are multi-cloud. So it's the reality. Now, how do we make best use of what that actual reality is? And that's what it's about for us. And that means a combination of on-premises infrastructure, certainly. It's also probably in co-location facilities a lot of times, at the edge, whatever you define the edge to be, how near or far. And of course, in the public cloud, even how do you get more consistency there? So it's really about how that large estate, that data estate, and how do you simplify that across the board?
Well, I will get into some of the technical details. I can't wait for that because I know a lot of people in our audience are really familiar or really excited about the whole concept of infrastructure as code. But before we do that, I kind of want to touch on, Dell is really in a unique position. I mean, you guys are, world leaders in supplying hardware, but, the cloud is the cloud. It is what it is. And the thing that's interesting in part of the pitch for APEX is the whole, we are outcome oriented. Give us an outcome that you need for your technology and let us architect it. And I think that's huge because a lot of companies, even really large companies, don't know what they need to worry about, or don't know necessarily everything about how they architect everything. It's like, okay, we've got a really amazing internal cluster. We just need to deploy that same cluster in the cloud. And it's like, well, no. When you're in the cloud at scale, you've got some different options as far as how you do that. There might be specialized hardware available that you could lease that would solve the problem way easier than a DIY solution.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I mean, for us, we're known as infrastructure providers, and we're famous for the supply chain and all that goodness, and that is all still true. But when we look at multi-cloud, it's kind of that's a side story. What we're really talking about is software, and we're talking about services, delivering outcomes, and working with a broad cloud ecosystem. I mean, for us, what we know is that pretty much every customer is going to work with multiple hyperscalers, multiple different vendors, probably a co-location vendor in there. All of that's going to be the reality of IT. And for us, it's about how do we make that ecosystem work together? And, speaking of, what you don't know, a lot of customers knock on the door and said, I want out of the data center business. Okay. So, let's break that down. And even if you simply want to take the estate you have now, move some of it into the cloud and some of that into an Equinix facility in Ashburn, there is a lot that goes into solving what you're really going for. Do you really want to keep managing that and you just literally want the building to be taken care of, or do you really want to actually get out of the infrastructure business and the data center business and take that to the next level? So there's all of these really important partnerships, and what we're trying to do is, hey, how far up the stack do you want to focus? And we'll deliver that as an outcome. And then you can take it from there. And therefore, we kind of streamline it with Equinix or with Amazon, whoever it makes sense to say, okay, let's make them work together. And then our customers can say, okay, this is what I do want to control. You guys take care of the rest. Then I don't have to worry about it.
Now, for everybody in the audience who might not be familiar with some of the players, everybody knows Dell and Microsoft and Google. They've got their cloud offerings, but Equinix. There's a video that we're working on with one of their tools they offer completely free and open source. It's called Tinkerbell. And Tinkerbell is this really amazing piece of software. So, like when we've done our server videos, where it's like, oh, here's my great big fire-breathing new server with terabytes of NVMe and blah blah blah. You can use a tool like Tinkerbell and let it actually provision the hardware. It can connect to the IPMI and physically provision it. So if I need to build a cluster of a dozen servers, it really is more like cattle and less like pets, because I can just plug them all into the network, feed some MAC addresses into a spreadsheet, and Tinkerbell will bootstrap those into whatever I need. There's a script. One of the people on our forum, I think, put together a script that will actually even bootstrap into ESXi for VMware. So you literally just plug in a server, give it a MAC address, and that's all the configuration that you need to do for physical bare metal. So no matter what kind of a problem your enterprise customer has, if you really need bare metal automation and orchestration like virtual machines, you can do that with bare metal. And that's kind of mind-blowing that that level of automation exists and is so attainable, and that Dell can leverage partnerships like that to get whatever it is that you need.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. I mean, Equinix, the reason why our partnership is so meaningful is, as we're kind of known as the infrastructure player, they're known as the data center provider, but you're exactly right. Equinix Metal is where Tinkerbell comes from. And that's the future, right? That is all about network automation and how do you provision something. And, the partnership we have with them is really just beginning. And it's those types of, the kind of the unknown that a lot of us are actually working together on is what's actually going to change. And yes, there's a whole bunch of compute involved, and right, there's a lot of networking, a whole lot of storage that we're going to scale along with it. And we are the storage experts and have been for decades, but like, you don't need to be the storage expert. We know whether it's object and file and block, and we'll give you the right combination. And if you want to operate that, that's great. If you want to manage some of it, we can do that too. But really, like, let us handle that. Let Equinix handle the power and cooling and interconnects and cross connects, and don't worry about that, because you can automate that. And they've built some incredible tools and capabilities there. That's what we want to really simplify and bring together.
Yeah, if you really take everything to its logical conclusion, in the beginning, in terms of like how companies shaped the face of the kinds of things that we're talking about now, in the beginning, there was Amazon with their API. And I'm sure when Jeff Bezos was doing, warehouse automation for books, and it's like, okay, all you departments are just bickering and squabbling, or we're going to talk with an API. We're going to talk with a standards-based thing. HR has to communicate with provisioning via an API. We're going to do away with everything but the API. And now the API has grown so much. Amazon is responsible for inventing a lot of things, sure, but now everybody else is also catching up and they have their own APIs. And so now, after that Cambrian explosion of that, the way that I see this shaking out is ultimately everything is implemented with infrastructure as code. We did the video on Cloudflare. Cloudflare is R2, and it's like you put R2 in front of Amazon stuff, and it's like, oh, that's disruptive pricing. And that infrastructure as code is really something that has a big promise from Apex, and I would really love if you could expand on that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting for us because we have this broad storage portfolio. We have all this experience in infrastructure, but increasingly, even our own IT department says, I don't want to talk about infrastructure, just tell me how to access it. So we've really worked hard to make sure we have northbound APIs across our portfolio. We have kind of a build your own DevOps environment kind of path, and then we have almost buy a DevOps ready platform path. And it's a build your own is largely where most people are still today, is what we're finding. So it's all about the APIs, it's automation. So Ansible playbooks across the portfolio, going to continue to build those, and Terraform and everything else. And because we have this breadth in storage, what we've really seen is, hey, I really want to use XYZ storage, whether it's our object storage or our file as persistent storage for my Kubernetes environment. And to do that, we've created a whole library of the CSI drivers and now actually container storage modules, which are more advanced data services. So you can use whatever one of our storage platforms with whatever Kubernetes distribution you want and have that persistent storage layer. So you can build that development environment that you want, but you actually get to choose your infrastructure underneath, because as much as we all thought that maybe the public cloud would be this magic button to abstract everything, it turns out people really care at the end of the day still what's underneath. And
Yeah.
they want to leverage these that have that choice, but still you got to be able to support that as code. So you got to be able to support the right environment. You got to be able to really come at it as infrastructure, as code with the, and not only do we have the automation and the APIs, but they're all accessible, they're all consumable, really a self-service experience to say, hey, yeah, I maybe I bought this object storage platform, but really I'm going to set that up really as an infrastructure as code experience.
Isn't that really the apex, pun intended, of how
Oh,
of
you
how
couldn't resist.
you can leverage Dell's API and Dell's metrics to get a truly apples to apples comparison. So, like, if I'm a customer of Apex and I'm looking at my costs, and your API supports all these different kinds of block storage, it's pretty trivial for me to take our real world customer, block storage and run it through a couple of what if scenarios, as long as my infrastructure is code, and say, okay, wow, this combination of features, really, that's going to save me 10% or 20% or whatever. And also having access to Dell's engineers, because presumably Dell's engineers are working at scale with all of your customers and saying, okay, yes, this is the best deal. This is how we can move this. This is a new player in the market, or this is a new approach for this that we can leverage and end up with a better result. And so, again, your strategy of results oriented or outcome oriented planning kind of makes sense. And you really, with this kind of stuff, you really don't have another choice to do it any other way, because it's this really competitive melting pot of cloud amalgamation. I don't really know how to describe it.
Well, and the interesting thing is we're not only working with all of our customers, but we're working with the hyperscalers themselves, right? As much as, a really easy example is file storage. Every one of the hyperscalers has file storage for years, but turns out they kind of all figured out what those of us who have been building storage appliances for a long time know. File is hard, and building a real enterprise file system is hard. So, one of the really interesting areas that you'll see more on, and we announced as Project Alpine, is bringing that file storage software to the cloud, offering that as a cloud service. So you get the best of what we know our customers need, but you get it as an outcome, and you get that as a cloud experience. There's a lot that now, as we kind of enter this next evolution of this reality of multi-cloud, is you don't have to compromise. Like, we'll enable the right infrastructure underneath. We just are simplifying how you can consume that and experience that.
Yeah, there are probably a fair number of administrators in our audience that have experiences with a SAN, and it's like, okay, is this going to be a SAN for file-based stuff, or is this going to be a SAN that manages a VDI type experience? Because those have vastly different performance characteristics.
Yeah. And the easiest way to think about that and if you know the Dell storage portfolio, then you kind of know we have every flavor there is of block, file, object, unified, right? Combine your file and object. So we're taking our flagship file system, we're taking our flagship primary storage and bringing those into cloud environment. So when we talk about file, we're talking about a massive scale out file system, multi-protocol access, really truly is used in a number of different industries today. Media and entertainment's a great example, right? For video rendering and that type of thing, life sciences, for things like genomics. So it's that type of files, what we're talking about, massive performance at scale. This is not your average filer that you just want to, connect in and send your directory to. This is a pretty a pretty hardcore file system we're
I put
talking
a
about.
7 GB movie in the directory. Go ahead and download it. And it's like, oh, it's having to come from Ireland. This is going to take a while. And it's like, no, we
Yeah,
figured all that out in the architecture. You don't have to. You can put a little more thought into it than that.
exactly. Yes.
All right, so Dell, I get the feeling, we've sort of talked about this in preparing for this video. It's like Dell is accelerating developers. And what really piqued my interest with that is that what we have with Apex is the tool chain is available locally. If you have a local developer group and you want to run this tool chain on your own physical hardware and your own developer group, you can, but Dell offers everything up to, turnkey cloud solutions so that you build it on your local infrastructure and you want to deploy it in the cloud. Dell will handle 5 nines of reliability for you. But, can you tell us a little bit how that works? Because that seems like the promised land from a DevOps perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Accelerating DevOps is really something that we see as really early days, but something that we're really, really excited about. And it's interesting to even watch hyperscalers have evolved rapidly, right? Amazon's EKS Anywhere is a great signal there. Microsoft with Azure Arc and the Azure Hub and Azure Stack HCI capabilities. It's very clear that we're all accepting the fact that we're going to be in this hybrid cloud, multi-cloud world. And the really exciting thing for us is we have a whole portfolio today of what we call a DevOps ready platform. And that means you get to buy your infrastructure and put that where you want, your own data center, a colo facility at the edge, whatever you want the edge to be. And you get to have that cloud environment and those cloud services running on your infrastructure that you can control and manage if you want to. We can manage that for you. You can completely consume that as CapEx, or you could actually have that as an OpEx transaction. You can kind of turn the dial on what's the cloud experience you're looking for. Choose that cloud operating environment, choose that infrastructure, choose the location, and it's fully compatible with what's in the cloud. And we're talking, whether it's EKS Anywhere from Amazon, it's Azure Stack, Anthos, and with Google, certainly VMware, obviously a huge partnership continues with VMware, with Tanzu, as well as Red Hat and OpenShift. So you have just that breadth, and even, we just announced last week Rancher support. So it doesn't matter what that environment is, we can enable you to support that where you want it, but also have that interoperability with the public clouds as well.
OpenSUSE has been busy, definitely. Uh, so it's really, not to put too fine a point on it, but the promise for developers is that you can have one tool chain that's open that will connect to whatever you need. So if you build something that depends on a provider specific tool, that can be supported with Apex. If you build something that's really complicated and depends on several different components from different cloud providers, no problem. But if you build something that just depends on, we have file services that must meet this requirement. We need blob storage that must meet this performance requirement. We have a database infrastructure that must meet this functional level and this level of performance. You can define that in your infrastructure and then be able to deploy it. And you can just turn around and say, here's your check. Dell, you're responsible for maintaining our 5 nines of availability. And what the developer experiences on-prem and the developer experiences as they develop, that move to production is seamless because there is no difference between the local infrastructure and the cloud infrastructure. And if that's what the promise is here, that's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. And again, it comes back to the ecosystem. For us, this is about partnerships, joint development. How do we work with the hyperscalers? What can we build together? Because this is not something either of us can do on our own. We have to be working together to enable that. And some are more aggressive than others. And, we're really excited about, we have a lot to offer today, and we've got even more coming in the future.
I like that Apex integrates from different providers. So you do almost kind of get a best of breed offering, and it also creates kind of a marketplace. If there are companies that are offering a superior solution to anything else in the market, it looks like Dell's already working with them. See also Equinix and some of the other Dell partners that I'm not sure everybody in our audience has heard of, but they're there. They've been there forever and they've been doing good work forever. So it's nice to have that validation. I think to look at that and say, oh yeah, they're clued in. They know what they're doing.
We're trying certainly.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. This has been a great look at Apex. Are there any other parting words of wisdom? Or I know I'm going to get a look at the Apex console, so that's going to be coming in another video. But any other parting words of wisdom or anything that you could impart to aspiring DevOps engineers? Because we got a lot of students in the audience as well. This is the future. This level of automation, mark my words, is absolutely the future.
Yeah, I think, hey, culture of this audience and building your own and really experiencing and getting hands-on is the best way to learn and be part of this community. And know where you want to spend your energy and take advantage of the automation that already exists for everything else, because you could spend up writing endless lines of code that we've already written. So focus your time and energy on the things that are going to help you build where you're going.
It is a really interesting project that Apex is, and it'll be really interesting to follow it over the next couple of years. So I'm really looking forward to taking a look at the console, and thank you again for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.